Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. The White House is playing math with stimulus. I'm smiling because there's so much work that the White House is doing in order to try and get support. Folks, I'm smiling, I'm laughing because politics actually makes me laugh, actually makes me smile. I'm a nerd, so I can actually process this information and make videos about it, but I can understand if you really don't want to read about it and want to get your information from a 42-year-old American Indian on YouTube. It's just I'm in that kind of a mood today. But folks, seriously, let's get down to business. Here's the headline of a Bloomberg article on your screen: the White House stimulus math. Do 70 TV hits ensure zero defections? In a nutshell, we know that Vice President Kamala Harris has been on multiple television networks in different parts of the country, including West Virginia, where we have the conservative Democrat Joe Manchin. And so, what the vice president is doing is trying to gather support for the stimulus package and help President Biden and the entire administration gather a lot of public support for this package, because guess what? There's going to be zero support, zip, from Republican senators. And in addition, what the White House has done is done over 70 TV interviews. Yep, 70 TV interviews. And at the same time, the Democrats cannot afford to lose a single vote in the Senate from their caucus. In other words, the Democrats, with 50 Democratic senators, need every single vote, including the vote of the Vice President Kamala Harris, to get to the majority of 51 for a simple majority to pass budget reconciliation. In fact, this entire strategy serves as a dry run for the next stimulus, the next massive stimulus, which is going to be the Build Back Better agenda, which could potentially be larger than $3 trillion. We're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about the redevelopment of our roads, the redevelopment of our bridges. We're talking about the restructuring of our internet, 5G, broadband. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about things that are needed to bolster our entire foundation in our economy and prepare us for the next generation as we prepare to compete with China and even the Middle East. Speaking of the Middle East, you've probably heard that US intelligence has released the report pertaining to what happened to the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and the US has already started to sanction Saudi Arabian diplomats. In fact, let's show you this headline of this article, which shows you that the sanctions of several diplomats in Saudi Arabia has already begun. So what does this all tell us? This tells us that the US is entering a brand new world where we have the traditional enemies, and then we potentially could have new fractures in our old alliances with the Middle East. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is we need to stop fighting, we need to stop making it about the red and the blue, and we need to build our infrastructure from within so we can stay competitive with an economy like China, which is expected to be larger than ours in the next 5 to 10 years. We need to stay competitive with an economy like the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, which has hundreds of billions of dollars in oil money. We need to be able to stay competitive. You've heard me mention this before on our channel, and I believe it with every fiber of my being. For me, it's not about the red or the blue, it's about the red, white, and blue. I'm not Democrat, I'm not Republican, I'm American. Now, let's get back to what President Biden and his team are doing. They've been pushing to get Republican support. They've been pushing to get public support in 13 states. And it's very interesting which states they've been focusing their TV interviews on. These states include Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Arizona, and Georgia. Do these states have a lot to do with A, the Biden administration's victory, the fact that they won the White House? Do these states have to do with the fact that the Democrats won the Senate? Which state's that? I think it's Georgia, the state from where we have Reverend Raphael Warnock. There he is. What's up, Reverend? And we have John Ossoff, the new 33-year-old Democratic senator. Think about this. Pennsylvania, Ohio, the key to victory as far as President Biden was concerned. Pennsylvania being the big one. And then we have West Virginia, where we have the conservative Democrat Joe Manchin, whose vote is going to be absolutely essential for anything the Democrats want to get done. And of course, we have Georgia, the important state of Georgia, which allowed the Democrats to regain control of the Senate, and Arizona, which is a state that President Biden won in order to claim the presidency. So Bloomberg reported that the White House has already put many senior administration officials on air. I can tell you who some of these administration officials are. Vice President Kamala Harris, the director of the White House Economic Council, Brian Deese, Jared Bernstein, another member of the White House Economic Council. And of course, we know Jen Psaki, who's been doing TV interviews, the White House press secretary, pushing for the American Rescue Plan, not to mention the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. So according to Bloomberg, these officials have been on air in more than 70 news stations, and President Biden himself has visited the states of Wisconsin and Michigan, and these are states that President Biden flipped from Donald Trump to win the presidency, to directly make the case. And folks, this weekend, in fact today, the president is headed to Texas, which proved much more competitive. Even though former President Trump won the state of Texas, it was much more competitive than most people anticipated. So why is the White House doing all this? This is where things get more interesting. According to Bloomberg, White House officials believe that their outreach beyond Congress could provide political protection for the president. The thinking is that if he can maintain and grow public backing for the bill, this is beyond the House and beyond the Senate, it will help with other priorities. Why? Because President Biden is going to announce a much bigger Build Back Better agenda, the infrastructure plan. And in the coming weeks, he's going to release what is essentially a multi-trillion-dollar plan. I've heard some people say it's going to be 3 trillion, others say it's 4 trillion. But yeah, I mean, folks, what's a trillion here and there? It's not that much money. I walk around with $1 trillion in my pocket. There is no chance I could fit $1 trillion in my pocket in cash, just so that you know. But if it was on a debit card, yeah, I'd walk around with $1 trillion. I wouldn't tell anyone. But keeping Democrats unified on this infrastructure plan is going to be a key initiative for President Biden, and that's why he's trying to gather as much public support as possible. And if you thought it's tough to get support for this $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, folks, I can assure you that getting support for that $3 trillion infrastructure plan is going to be an even bigger lift for the Biden administration. Now, while all this is going on, there actually has been criticism of the stimulus mat from the Biden administration by a Republican pollster. Whit Ayers, who's a longtime Republican pollster, said 7 Republican senators just voted to convict a president of their own party of impeachable offenses. If you cannot get a single one of those Republicans, you're not trying. This is an interesting point. He said they will need Republican support for future initiatives. Why stiff them coming out of the gate? In other words, why alienate Republicans by passing a massive stimulus bill with no support from Republicans, which is what it's looking like right now. And finally, let's take a look at a comment from John Podesta, who was a former advisor to former President Barack Obama and the former chief of staff to former President Bill Clinton. So this guy has spent quite a bit of time in the White House, so he knows what he's talking about. John Podesta said this: I don't think the fact that you have got polling indicating American people are supportive of the relief is, in essence, the end of the story. They will really have to sell the fact that they are good stewards of the economy, and they are coming behind this with another big package of investment. In other words, it's not as easy as just gathering public support, because you need Republicans on board. And it's very clear that the Democrats can't afford to lose a single vote. We know that the minimum wage proposal essentially did not make it. And if you've been following my channel, I've been saying this for weeks, that I did not think that the minimum wage would make its way through the Senate, and it's very clear that it's going to be left out of the bill. I've been saying that for weeks if you've been following my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new about the stimulus mat. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. That would really mean a lot to me. That would make me very happy. That helps out the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.